It's great to catch up with you, friend. It's great to see you. I think the last time that I saw you was at the we had a grand opening for re-grand opening for one of our sites back in September, October, and didn't get a chance to connect with you in February and at the state capitol, but here we are. It's very nice to see you again.
Yeah, so Aaron's talking about in February, every year here in Colorado, we have Cyber School Day at the Capitol. And we bring schools and families from all across the state. And we have, has an educational component where we all meet at the Colorado History Center, and the kids get free admission to the museum. And we do some programming. We talk about what's going on with the State Board of Education, with our legislators, what are they saying about cyber school and online learning in Colorado. And then we march from the History Center to the west steps of the Colorado State Capitol. And that's a special event because we really try to highlight our students. And we have gold students every year give a speech, which is always really inspirational, and usually they make me cry when they're giving those speeches, because I'm just like, every kid is my kid, and I'm just so proud of all of them. And usually it's a senior that's giving the speech on behalf of the school, which is wonderful. But it's a busy, crazy day because there's kids everywhere and teachers, and I'm running around like crazy trying to spend a little bit of time with everybody. But I was really so grateful when you extended the invitation for me to visit the Aurora site opening. That was just, it's a beautiful facility, and to see, where you guys do the work, where the magic happens with these students and your teachers. That's just one of your sites. Tell us a little bit about Goals Model of Education and your reach throughout the state.
Great, thank you. Last I remember, we have 33 locations throughout the state of Colorado. We have this year, 2019, 2020, we had 4 sites in the Denver metro area. The site that you just mentioned, the Aurora Mall, we still have one there. We have one in kind of southeast Denver, more like the Cherry Creek kind of area. We got a site there. We've got one in Lakewood. We've got another site in Thornton. And we opened up 3 brand new sites for the upcoming school year. One in Montbello, one in Commerce City, and one up in Brighton. So as Tilly mentioned, we're a multi-district. I'm stuttering because sometimes I say blended and sometimes I say online. So if I say blended, what I like to tell people is that 80 to 90% of our students do 100% of their work online. One of our senior directors coined that pretty well, and I think it's something that I'd like to continue to say just like that. We have students that really come from all walks of life. For whatever reason, they don't either. They've been bullied in school, or they were part of the justice system, or they have some physical ailments that they're not able to attend to school and sit down and be really be able to sit down at a school kind of all day, every day. Students can work from the comfort of their living room. They can come into a site also, though, and they can get help from some pretty amazing educators. We have, I believe, the best teachers in the state, because our teachers, work very hard to be able to provide curriculum and videos, and every one of our teachers really has to be able to develop this curriculum in such a way that a student can log in, complete all the work online, But like I said, we do have drop-in centers throughout the state that students can go in and get some help from either their academic coaches or a teacher.
Yeah, it's a really phenomenal model. And, you know, and I feel blessed that I get to meet your students because they really do have some amazing stories to share. And this past spring, the Colorado Coalition of Cyber School Families, we produced a book called Snapshots of Success. And we were able to feature some goal students. And just, you know, one of the students, Jose, he works like 3 jobs on the side doing construction. And then, you know, work before school and after school to work on his schoolwork, which is phenomenal. And the way that you support students, I think, is really special and fits a need that so many students here in Colorado they need in their life, and where a traditional setting, it's just not going to be the best place for them because they're supporting themselves, they're supporting family members, you know, on top of trying to get that high school diploma. So I was looking at your course catalog for this year, and you've got some new courses that, let me see, I wrote it down. ASVAB Test Prep, Automotive Design STEAM Lab, Biomechanics Lab, Structural Engineering. I know that wasn't offered in my school.
No.
Cool. Can you talk a little bit about some of those new things that you're offering?
Yes. So what our curriculum and instruction department did was they reached out to students and they started asking students what they wanted. And I want to touch on one thing before I move on to really answering your question, and that is that individualized education is not it's the most difficult way to do education. If we're talking about every student and student needs, every student has different needs and every student learns differently. And so in order to be able to meet the needs of the students where they're at, the curriculum and the courses, even the courses that you offer, Tilly, they have to be able to be thought of in such a way that they actually make sense for the kids, and the students are going to want to be there and enjoy them. So, so individualized education is not the easiest route. However, the students that have not had success in other schools have success with goal. In fact, we had about 800 students this year that may not have graduated had they continued to stay in a brick and mortar school. And so schools like Goal exist because of the needs of the students. Jose, 3 jobs and school. We had a student last year who 3 children, 2 of them had cancer. She tried and tried, was in our over 21 program, and she ends up graduating last year, crying as she's walking across the stage, and I'm crying and everybody's crying, and because you really do get to know your students, and that's the one of the things about Goal that I love so much is the depth of relationships that you get to meet, because there's no passing periods. We're in an open concept room. There's people around. You're able to meet with people and see them, and we have coaches that reach out and care, and they do a very good job. And so, we do have kind of the backstory to your question, but these classes were again, they're brand new classes, so they're hands-on classes. And if sometimes hands-on is difficult enough to do in a brick and mortar setting when somebody's sitting right next to you. And I think this is the other part about online education that people don't understand, is that students are having to abandon a very familiar way of doing school. Perhaps for 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 years, they have sat in a classroom and they've done school the way that in a traditional school. So they've kind of done school that way, if you will. They come to goal, and it is a new way of learning. So they have to kind of reteach themselves how to learn in this environment. So that's part of it. And so another part of that is learning how to take a hands-on class and follow instructions online. And students in this setting, the most successful students are strong advocates for themselves. So from day one, we really encourage students to be their own advocate. And now, yes, they're gonna need some support along the way, and yes, we may need to encourage that support. But we scaffold that, or we build that into our classes in such a way that we matriculate students not just through the curriculum, but also through the skills in being more of what education calls an autonomous learner. So they're more self-directed. They initiate their own tasks, and they also persist through those tasks and through those difficulties. And so when you talk about teaching skills like problem solving technology, and problem solving how to complete an online task in an unfamiliar and uncomfortable environment, is remarkable. When you see students turn in, beginning of the year, they may turn in work that you're like, they need some help, and then at the end of the year you see that mastery of skills. So it's extremely rewarding to the students. I can also say that it's extremely rewarding to our staff when I'll go into a site and they say, Timothy, for example, I'm making up a name, but he's really struggling with how to do school online. He's doing such a great job, and you start hearing stories, and students start coming up to you and sending you Teams messages and emails and saying, "Thank you so much for all that you're doing, and couldn't have done this without your team." So we feel like we get those messages a lot, and it's a blessing to be able to serve in this capacity and work with the student population that we get to work with.
I love what you're saying. And you're talking about this student, oh, I'm getting a little feedback here. Let me see. See if we could turn it down a little. You were talking about that student who had faced, cancer, and it took her several tries to get across that stage. And one of our viewers here, Lori Cooney, who actually worked at Goal at the Aurora site, I think before you joined the school, but she said kudos to her. That's determination. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits that our students that participate in online and blended learning is they really become, they determine the course of their education, they're masters of their education, and they develop that student voice and that student advocacy, that self-advocacy that is so important to all of us as we become adults, that they get that in their high school years before we let them loose on, the career field or the military or higher ed, wherever these kids end up. They leave our schools, really kind of, they know who they are and they know how to advocate for what they need, which I think is amazing. And I know I've seen Goal graduate after Goal graduate go out and graduate and be, productive adults. And that's what we want for these kids. You were talking about, you didn't know, should I say we're online? Should I say we're blended? For me, I would say you're a blended school because
Yeah.
your students do have the ability to go into a drop-in center and get that one-on-one instruction support from educators and administrators. Whereas our full-time online kids, we might set up special study hours or groups or coffee time someplace across the state. But you guys, your kids know where to find you. If they're having a bad day, if they're not grasping material, they know you guys are there. You are their safety net. And so I think it'll be interesting. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of what you're doing coming out of the COVID-19 school closures, because I think school districts are trying to figure out, okay, remote learning was not a success for our friends in the traditional brick and mortar system by and large. We hear from parents and students and educators, they weren't satisfied. And we're hoping right now that they're learning from, that whole experience. They're improving their remote learning plans. Should we have to have more periods of social distancing? But I think your model really could benefit a lot of our traditional school districts across the country. That said, you had an in-person component. How did COVID-19 affect goal and your operation of those drop-in centers and the overall, how did it affect you and your students?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the very, very beginning, before before schools were really asked to stay home, we were able to come to the sites, and and then once that might have been there wasn't very long between the time that I'm trying to remember. It feels like it's been years ago that this happened,
right?
but so it was for a short period of time, and then once we worked directly from home, one of the things that I noticed was that the students that used to come into the site pretty frequently, I had a couple of them reach out to me and say, I'm really struggling. I need that support every day. And so I would set up meetings with them on a weekly basis to really touch base on how are you doing and how are things going. And I made sure that their teachers were reaching out to them and talking to them, and let's talk about your math today at this specific time. So I really have to build that into the schedule. And I think that's one of the things that if when you set up when you go from hybrid blended where a kid can drop in and then all of a sudden there's a student in front of you that didn't have an appointment, and then you help them. In this model, it's a bit harder to do that if you're completely online. And I think that you have to stick more to let's meet tomorrow at 1:00, or I can meet in 2 hours. Does that work for you? And you really have to kind of stick to a pretty good schedule. Providing one of the things that I had staff do was provide a schedule for when they would have for teachers when they'd have their office hours, and if they were doing a live instruction, when those live instruction hours were for the different types of classes. And so we had to make sure that we were kind of front loading the communication piece with students, and that was one of the ways that we did it. If students had concerns, like we had some students that did, we were able to accommodate them pretty easily. We're a Microsoft showcase school, the only online school, the only blended online school to have such a designation that has an AEC designation. We're an alternative education campus, so we use Microsoft products. So we utilize Teams to be able to talk to students just the same way you and I are talking to Day Friend. And they have a great chat function that if a student doesn't want to talk, they can always send a chat, and that's okay too. So we really had to be extremely deliberate about how we communicated with students, really make sure that we follow through. Which again, that's no different than it would be in a brick and mortar. However, in this kind of environment, if somebody asks you a question and there's no response on your end, if you translate that into a face-to-face environment, if I walked up to you and said, "Hi, Tilly, how are you today?" and you didn't respond, okay, the student's mind, or in my mind, like, okay, well, okay, see you later. It would be kind of awkward, right? It's kind of an awkward silence. So ensuring that staff understand that sometimes you have to kind of do what, like if you go to Lowe's or something and you walk in and you ask for somebody's help and they can't help you right away. They say, "I'll be right with you. Give me just a second." But you have to type that because you can't just say, "I'll be right with you." You have to type it and press send. So I think that those are the kinds of interactions and communications that are respectful. Virtual presence is a big deal, a really big deal. And so one of my assistant principals and a couple of I would say my assistant principal staff and we really started working on some different types of kind of principles around what does an online presence really look like. There's a virtual presence, there's this face-to-face kind of presence. There's a lot of different ways that we're able to communicate. And then the other part is through the courses. Again, if we're utilizing asynchronous education, which is asynchronous is I post something and then you read it later and then you respond to it and then I respond to your response 3 hours after that. That's what I kind of mean by asynchronous, right? So if there's asynchronous instruction, you got to be very clear as an educator about what you're communicating to students, because if there's confusion, it may be 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 hours, or maybe even the next morning before the student can actually have their question clarified. So it's a lot different when you start looking at it from the perspective of this student may not see this for 3 hours and I may not respond to them until, if it's Friday and if they're working at 2 o'clock in the morning, I may not respond until Monday at 9 o'clock. So again, that communication, I feel like as a school we adapted very well. I don't feel like we were not able to educate students. I felt like learning still took place. I felt like we had to change what we were doing a bit. And I think this is the big difference between schools kind of doing this now, brick and mortar schools doing this now, and Gold's been doing this since the very beginning, and there's a lot of schools that have been doing this from the very beginning. So there is a learning curve, and but I know that those educators, I felt like with my own daughter's school, she's in elementary school, and I felt like they did a pretty good job of picking up the pieces and really helping to try and formulate some education. And she was in the second grade this year, and we're very involved parents in our children's education, but I don't know that we've been this involved, because they would get some assignment and then we were the ones kind of doing the tutoring. The teacher wasn't there to tutor and do a lot of hand holding, so we had to do a lot of that. And but I think that's the other part of this, that it's the unseen is if there are students that are working and they also have parents who are working, and what does that look like? And is the math or the classes that we're offering, are the parents able to help them? And so that's why in asynchronous learning, it's really important for the staff to be able to send a very clear and concise message in the very beginning, because it could be another day before the student actually responds, and if they continue to get frustrated, I'm afraid that a student may not continue with that because of their frustration level, and that's something that we can't have happen. Is students get frustrated with their learning and say, you know what, you're making this a lot harder than what it really needs to be, and that's where kids kind of check out. So we have to really watch that.
There's so much there that I don't, you highlighted on several things that I've been concerned about, as we, you were in a great position because you already had the technology, you already had educators that were, had expertise in the technology, your students were comfortable working with technology. And so, I didn't worry so much about the learning continued, and that's what you all did. Where I get worried is you all still, even though we're doing online and blended learning opportunities, we were still impacted by this COVID-19 virus and all of these external things that are happening and how they impact the school. And and now I'll just get on my soapbox, because that, the state has a reopening advisory council, and I look at it, and there is not a strong presence of full-time online educators, practitioners, and parents and students on that advisory committee. And I think we are still very much looked at as an afterthought. And I think that's really unfortunate, because now what we're seeing is, millions of children across the country became like us overnight. And you have experience, and we also we were impacted. We should be able to share as well how we were impacted and how we might need to adjust and get additional resources, those kinds of things, to support all of our public school students. And we are public school participants here, yet we don't have a voice. And so I'm so grateful that you're here today to talk about it, to talk about how intentional you were with your staff, and the things that even you guys had to do to adapt, to and to keep education, to keep that continuity that your students really needed. So I'm thankful that you're here and sharing that, because those are messages that need to be heard, and we'll make sure that we keep amplifying the work that you're doing. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is, do you have a typical student at Goal?
A typical student? No, the types of students that we have are, I touched on this a little bit ago. We have students who are forced. Okay, let me put it to you this way: for one reason or another, the face-to-face environment does not suit them. They may be overage and undercredited. Okay, so 52% of our student population are seniors. Okay.
And do they come to you their senior year, or are they coming to you before?
Yeah, we see them sometimes in their junior year. So, but yeah, so we'll get them in their junior, senior year. We started seeing an uptick in our ninth grade student population and our sophomore population this year. So we're starting to be attractive to students who are coming right out of middle school. and coming into this kind of an environment, this type of environment. Some of them have been in other online or blended communities before, but for most of them, not so much. Most of them, they've come, from a brick and mortar, and they're here with us now. And again, it could be, a myriad of reasons that they're here with us. But I think, like I said, about half of our students are overage and undercredited. We've got some great programs to be able to work with those with students who are in such a place, we offer some pretty interesting classes, and we as you mentioned before, and yeah, there are some state required classes, but we also offer classes like personal finance. That's one of that one in engineering. I think engineering design was probably the most requested, according to the data that we were provided by our curriculum and instructional coordinator, that came out of the data from this last year. Personal finance has always been a real interesting one. Students want to know how to think about money and balance a budget and those kinds of things. So, but yeah, as far as typical student, we have students who lost time in school because they were incarcerated, so they're here with us now, and there's students who may have been expelled from another school, or we may have students who are, as you mentioned earlier, parents themselves, and really have to work and take care of their children and go to school. So this works out really well. They can do some schoolwork while their students are, while their own children are sleeping, and get some, some study in here and there and everywhere. And I think before all this, we were asked to stay home because of this virus. Students would bring in their children sometime, and the kids would hang out, and they would lay in the. There wasn't a staff member who wouldn't be willing to hold a baby, so that was always a
That's
a delight.
My kind of school.
Yeah, well, the other part of that is, and what I think the point I really want to get across with this is that I think a lot of students and a lot of society feels that education is a direct path, and it's not a direct path. Students can fall off, and for whatever reason, they may have a great reason. They've got to work to help support their families. Denver is tricky in the sense that sometimes students have to work to support their families. It's a gentrified area. The cost of living is extremely high, and a lot of times kids have to work to help support their families. And so they may not be able to focus as much, or they have younger brothers and sisters to watch while their parents are, because of the cost of daycare. So there's it's very complex. When anytime I get into a discussion about any one of these questions you're asking me, it's always a pretty complex discussion. It's never like a straightforward kind of answer. It's always like there are a lot of things that kind of intermingle that really kind of formulate the answer. And this one is definitely no different. What I do, if I was to say a typical thing that I see from student to student, what I see is they have a deep sense of perseverance. They have a strong sense of that, like, grit, that ability to be able to. A lot of these students, and I said it in my graduation speech, a lot of the students that are here, they've gone through things that a lot of people don't have to go through, and they've done it before the age of 18, and yet here they are, about on the verge of graduating. So if there was a typical goal student, I would use those words of a student that perseveres, a student that has some grit, and a student that can persist through some pretty difficult and trying times.
That's amazing. That's, I think, what we want for all our children, to have those qualities. One of our Amy Threewood is watching today on Facebook, and she says there's never a typical online student. There are so many reasons why students choose the online setting. And then as you were talking about, you know, all the different circumstances and you know, of these students, she said, you know, you're meeting students where they're at. And that's really important work that you're doing. Let's see.
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah, I can't, you know, I'm a fan and of all of the work that you all do. You all back, oh my goodness, it was probably maybe November. My friend Andrew Campanella was working on a book called The School Choice Roadmap. And he sent me a copy and I got to read it, got a little sneak peek. And as I was reading it, of course, I went to the section. It's a book basically to help parents navigate their school choice and to figure out, you know, the questions to ask as you're trying to figure out which learning environment is right for your student. And of course, I went right away to the online section first because that's near and dear to my heart. And as I'm reading it, there's Goal Academy being highlighted in this wonderful book. And so it's evident that you all are doing great work and grabbing the attention of the education community. So if parents are out there and you are thinking about, you know, what your options may be, and I think that's happening a lot right now because, you know, with all the uncertainty with this virus, I highly recommend Andrew's book, and I'll put a link to it in this thread so you can investigate it and you can read more about what Goal is doing. What kind of like wraparound services are you providing to the students? Do you have school counselors? You know, all those things that we think about that, you know, are under the brick and mortar roof. Are you providing those kinds of services? Are there clubs, activities? You know, some of those things that make school fun. Are those happening at Goal?
Yes, ma'am. So I'll talk about the wraparound services a little bit, and then I'll talk about the clubs and activities that we have. As far as our wraparound services, so we do have school counselors, and like in a brick and mortar, a school counselor, they may do some counseling, kind of one-on-one, like counseling with a student, and then they'll also work on transcripts and those sorts of things. So, and then some schools will have a school psychologist, and so that's one thing we do not have. We do not have school psychologists, but we will provide when we hear of a circumstance where a student may need a psychologist. We'll make sure that we put the student and the parents in contact with the right person. If need be, we'll even set up the initial meeting ourselves. Our social emotional generalists are the ones who really provide those direct connects, the liaise between the school and the community resources. So we have food banks, we have homeless shelters. So there are, you know, quite a few options as far as you know, helping students with those physical needs that they have, so that we can help them to, you know, so that they're able to focus on, you know, on their schooling needs. So while we may not provide some of these ourselves, we have, you know, and this is the interesting thing about Denver, is that, you know, we have so many communities. You know, we have a school kind of in the Cherry Creekish area. The resources there are very different than the resources in Lakewood, and the differences in Thornton and Commerce City and Brighton. So we really have a lot of different partners in the Denver metro area, which we partner. So, you know, and so we really work hard to build out those resources and provide those opportunities so that we can help students you know, to help them to be successful in school. For clubs and activities, we just this year started a, oh, sorry, my brain just,
It's Friday.
it is Friday. Yeah, and today's our last day.
Oh, good.
We get our three.
I caught you right before vacation.
I would have come next week. No, even if, friend, no worries. No, we have an esports team. This was our first year, and actually if I'm not mistaken, I believe that they took second place in the nation for esports.
Amazing.
So very, very remarkable. Here we also have a partnership with Perfect World Music Academy. It's down in Pueblo, Colorado, and Carl and his team, they drove up to Denver once a week to give music lessons to students. It was actually a showcase a couple of weeks ago. The students had to put the music together, and they had an online showing of that, and it was phenomenal. And I was really impressed with the quality of work that came out of this program. So that's another way for that social support. If a student that comes to school with us wants to play football or basketball, or if they want to be in band, that is still something that we can do. We go into an MOU with the school, and part of that, of course, is that they have to keep that 2.0 grade point average to be able to play in those sports. So, but we're very willing for students to be able to do that. We also have clubs and different organizations. So this year we have student council. We have a parenting group. We have it was an online virtual art club, and then we have PRISM, which is a club for LGBTQ plus communities. So we have some great people that run every one of those groups, and they really pour their heart and soul in there. And I think that what you find in a school like Goal is the relationship aspect that you have. I'm sorry, that the staff have with the student. It's a very I've heard students tell me that they feel like their teachers really care about them, and that their teachers and people, they really listen to their needs. And so that's one of the things that I think I like a lot about, is that sometimes students need, it's not about, I need you to learn how to do math. It's sometimes they need to know that somebody is in their corner, and they need that, they need their self-esteem to be built up a little bit, and they may have low efficacy, and we really work hard to build that in them, because it's another barrier. It's another barrier to their education, is their own self-doubt, and helping them find those successes is part of our, I don't think people always look at this as a wraparound service, but being there for the students and providing that layer of support is extremely important, and they need to see it from those that are educating them. There was what was her name? She was an educator. She passed away several years back. She said, "Kids don't learn from people they don't like." Kids don't learn from people they don't like, is what she said. And, so true. I really built, my practice, my own educational practice, and everything that I do based on that premise. And we ensure that when we hire people, that they have that at the front of their mind, is that they're able to build those connections, and they're able to build relationships. They, of course, they have to be great educators, but we also want somebody who can build a bridge to a student that potentially may have never had a bridge built before.
That's important work, and I think that's what you call school culture. And
yes, ma'am.
I think we heard a lot during this crisis schooling that we just went through due to the coronavirus. I heard a lot of people, a computer will never replace a teacher, and you know, I need face-to-face. Well, of course you do. And no, we've never advocated for technology replacing teachers. It's the heart of everything that the schools we love do. And, that's, I don't think that these schools, the first online school opened in Colorado in 1997. I don't think we would be here 23 years later if that hard work that you guys are doing wasn't happening. And so I think it's a testament to the model and the educators and the culture that all of these schools develop. And each one's different. Every school has, their own little niche that they fill in the Colorado public school landscape. And but we're still here and we're still growing because of all of those things that you said, the relationships that you develop, the fact that you may be the last stop for many kids. I just read an article, we know we're going to see increases in enrollment for blended and full-time online schools. Are you hearing that from your communities?
Well, so we started we start re-enrollment because we're a school of choice. We have to students have to choose to re-enroll with us every year. Not like in districts.
You don't hold them hostage by their zip code and they have to come to you. No, you have to earn them, right?
Students choose to be here. And I think that's why it's when I moved to Colorado, it was very unfamiliar to me because that's not the kind of, I came from a district and I loved my principal. He was fantastic. I loved the assistant principals that I worked for and the teachers that I worked with. We didn't have to recruit students. We didn't have to go into our communities and build relationships. And they were based on, like you said, based on a zip code. So that was the biggest change and one of the harder things. But this year at this time, last year at this time, we had about 500 or so students enrolled in Goal, which for last year at this time was tremendous because the year prior, I think we had 625 students. Last year, we ended up enrolling about 925. And then right now, enrolling in the month of May and halfway through June, we have over 600 students enrolled already for next year, Tilly. So those are the kind of things that we've heard. And we're extremely excited about the opportunity, not for the sake of, and I think that this is the part that I also want to make sure of, is that this isn't about student numbers. This isn't about, that's not Goal's model. That's not how we do education. And I think that's another part to this that I've heard from when I've been in conferences and I've heard over people talking, and some of the negative that we get is they're stealing students, but that's not actually true. The students are dropping out and they're not doing anything. And what would you prefer to do? I mean, these are all rhetorical questions, right? What would you prefer these kids to do? And so, Goal is a tremendous school because of the heart that and this is from the very from our every part of our senior leadership team, to our CEO, to our director of operations, the director of curriculum, the director of academics, to our technology team, to our human resource department. We truly care about you said productive members of society. Our mission is to develop productive members of society, and we do it in a caring, supportive, and personalized environment. And the thing is that we're not here for a number. We're here for the kids, and I believe that it's take care of the students that are in front of you, and you do the very best that you can, and you help them achieve their goals and their dreams, and we don't worry about the other stuff. We worry about the students.
Yeah. So if a parent or student is watching this and they think goal may be where they need to be in the fall, what do they need to be thinking about? What should they start doing now? I'm pretty sure you don't want them to wait till August to start the process. What would you tell those families?
Yeah, there are naturally, as I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, naturally there's going to be some barriers, because students are going from a face-to-face every day to working from home. And one of the things that I'm working on my dissertation right now, and I'm asking students about their some questions, and some of the answers that I'm getting are, I got distracted with and so there are distractions. You're at home. It's your friends might come over, or there's video games, or there's my bed. I'm going to take a nap. So if you're going to work from home, is to really develop your own schedules. You got to be able to develop a schedule and stick with the schedule. And at the same time, not be so rigid with the schedule that, there's no room to manipulate the schedule. Yes, stick to it. If you're finding that it's not working because of one reason or another, alter the schedule, but don't abandon the schedule. Stick with a schedule. Stick with being able to do something like that, because where we see students struggling sometimes is with some kind of a schedule. Schools have a very strict bell schedule. The bell rings and you go to your next class, and the bell rings and you go to your next class. We don't have bells. So that is something. Now your coaches your academic coaches, your paraprofessionals will call you every day of the week to see how you're doing. They will check in with you. They will support you. They will do everything they can do to help you out. The other part of this is initiative. If parents are watching and they want to help their students really get ready for this, is really starting to take some initiative as far as tasks around the house, instead of hey, can you help with this? Really taking on those tasks without your parents having to say anything. I think that's important, because what we find sometimes is, I see you're behind on your math. Well, I think the student probably knew they were behind in their math, but sometimes but the good thing is we have some great coaches and great teachers that are very supportive and will encourage, and hey, don't feel bad about it. Let's pick it up today. Let's work on it. Let's kind of, so I think sometimes students aren't used to people, I'm not saying always, but for so much individual time, and I think that's a big difference, and we're able to do that, and we're able to provide that individual time. We have 2 to 3 times as many academic coaches as we do teachers, and it's for that relationship piece. It's to make sure that students' needs are taken care of, and that they have a support. So sometimes I think that students may not know how to react to that. Maybe they've never had that much support, but it definitely is there are a lot of layers of support in our school, and other things to consider. No, we provide technology, so we do provide laptops. We do provide hotspots if students need hotspots. So,
Awesome.
yeah. So if that's sometimes that could the technology could be a barrier to education, but when a student gets the laptop, they have Teams downloaded on their computer. They have Microsoft Office. They have access to all their classes, the online materials, and so. Being able to navigate through a computer, which I know, there's a lot of people saying, well, we live in a technology age. Yes, but I think a lot of students can use their phones very well, but may not know how to navigate a computer as well, and typing and those kinds of skills, like typing skills and keyboarding skills, and learning how to upload a document and knowing how to download something, and those kind of like skills that students can learn definitely. And the cool thing is, if they don't know how to do it, that is something that we provide training on to students, so that they can, again, we don't want there to be any barrier to their education. We're going to teach them how to do all those skills, and if there's anything that they need. And then the last thing, and I think this is probably the most important thing that I can say, and I talked about it earlier, Tilly, you mentioned it again, but is self-advocacy, is students being able to self-advocate for their learning needs. We sometimes get students who won't say anything because their computer broke and it's been broken for 6 weeks. And now there's 2 weeks left in the quarter, and then they say, I've been able to do work because my computer's broke. When did it break? And they say, oh, it broke in February. And it's like, okay, it's April. So I think that's another component, is that really getting students used to being able to advocate for themselves, and they need something just to I need help with my math. I'm really struggling with polynomials, or I'm really struggling with, or my computer broke, or sometimes students are afraid to express those needs for maybe they they haven't eaten in 2 days, and we have food in our sites. We have access to local food banks. There's other resources, like I said, there's a lot of different things that we provide students, that we truly care about each one of our students, and we really want to see them all succeed. And so we do our very best to be able to do that.
Well, wonderful. If you are interested in GOAL, once we wrap this up, I'll put links in the thread here on Facebook so that you can do more research on GOAL. Thank you, Aaron, for taking the time today to talk about GOAL Academy and the work that, just all of you are doing across the state of Colorado to support students in their educational journey and creating a culture of learning for them. And I'm grateful for all that you do, and always look forward to seeing GOAL students at our events across the state. And I wish you a very restful and relaxing summer break. I know it flies by really fast for you guys, and before you know it, it'll be back to school time again. But enrollment is open, so if parents and students are thinking about making a switch, do your research now, start that enrollment process now, so you can start at the beginning of the school year on time and not miss a beat, because we want you to have that really great start to the school year. It's 5 o'clock. We had that hour flew by. Thank you again, Aaron Perez with GOAL Academy. We will be back with the Parent Exchange next week, and Colleen will have a guest on Tuesday. And then I'm really excited. My good friend, the Parent Advocacy OG, will be here, Virginia Walden Ford. And I can't wait to have a conversation with her and talk about her experience in advocacy for students all across the country. So we'll be back next week. Everybody have a great weekend. Father's Day is this weekend, hint, hint. Go get something nice for your dad, and have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks so much. Thank you.